pleased that the South China Morning Post has ran it on the front page and has made quite a serious issue of it and has done an editorial and so on. And I've got the feeling that they've put it out there. They're going to wait for the government to respond. And if the government doesn't respond, I think they're going to keep at it, actually. There are certain things that, thank God, that the English media do actually keep pressing on, and they can see that if they allow the government to get away with this case, the first case I've heard of it happening, then it's going to happen again and again. That's the problem.
In history, it happens once in Macau before. I heard about in the late 80s or early 90s. I heard from my parents that somebody was kidnapped in Macau and then went back to China and then disappeared.
Yeah.
And then maybe 3 or 5 years later, it's been found in jail. Yeah, but it was somehow related to some criminal things with the officers in China or some spies or something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, as an activist, I'm personally extremely concerned by this story. Because what's stopping me basically getting thrown in the boot of a car after I've left this radio station tonight and driven across the border? But it's not just activists. Actually, it could be anyone. Actually,
right. If
you say something and you anger someone who's powerful enough, then it could happen to just about anyone. And that's the real danger. And the real concern is that the immigration department, someone, basically went along with it. And, if that does come out, that's actually what happened, the director, the boss of the immigration department is going to have to resign. It's that serious, actually.
Definitely.
But I can tell you something. Knowing what I know about Hong Kong, there's going to be a huge cover-up. And the government will not. They'll refuse to admit that that's what happened. They'll invent something. They'll say, "Oh, he went across voluntarily," or something like that. And then it's difficult actually for Albert Ho and for the media quite to know how to play it actually. Because then it's one word against the other and so on. But it's a difficult case actually to quite know how to insist on that guy receives a fair justice basically. But Ken, earlier before we came on air, you were talking about the Stockholm syndrome, weren't you? In terms of the mentality.
Syndrome. Maybe I speak in Cantonese.
Yeah.
Yes. It's direct translation. It's called 斯德哥爾摩候群症.
Okay.
Stockholm.
Do you think
syndrome.
Most people have heard of that term in Chinese?
Not really.
Okay.
But maybe you can explain a bit.
Because it's interesting. You were talking about it earlier, and it's the idea that when a story like that happens and people read about it, in terms of the thinking of Chinese Hong Kong people here, they think shit. Okay, but and then the second reaction is, okay, but we're
that's the way it is.
It's just the way it is,
yes.
and we just got to move on.
Yeah.
And I hope it doesn't happen to me. Yes. That's the kind of thinking. And
not in my backyard.
Yeah, it's the idea that that the relationship that people have with the government here, that we are ultimately submissive, and if the government abuse its power in a really outrageous way, and they do this very nasty thing to this guy, but we just have to accept it because we've got no power and blah blah blah. But it doesn't have to be like that actually. Yeah. If enough people with that story, if enough people kept saying no, you can't do that, and we're going to make a big enough issue, and we're going to keep on doing it until that injustice is corrected, then something would happen actually. But there is an element of this syndrome, that the idea that people just accept an injustice just because that's the way it's always been, and we haven't got any power.
Right. But one thing that really strikes me is that the media didn't really pay too much attention to it, and not a lot of people actually. I don't know if they have read about the case or anything, but there's not much discussion on this case.
It's only on one day on TV news.
Right.
Just one day only.
And it's not a small matter, as you know, right?
Yeah, I had the feeling that the Chinese media were playing it differently to the English media, actually.
Right.
the Chinese media, it was kind of a little bit of a story, in there. But again, I don't quite know why the Chinese media do that actually. And
I remember there was one case that some police just doing their regular check on the cars, parking outside one of the tycoon's house about, I think 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I didn't remember the exact time, and then found they are the police in China investigating something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then those China policemen. Yes, you remember?
I remember this story. Yeah.
Just smoothly went back to China, and then nothing happened again.
Yeah, and then it's all covered over and forgotten. And
so we should talk more about like the Stockholm syndrome, right?
Yeah.
For the Hong Kong people.
Yeah.
We forget these things very easily, but it could happen. Maybe some people say when you go to Shenzhen, behave yourself, but now it seems coming back to Hong Kong, coming back to the front of your garden, front of your house.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think as regards the law? Because obviously, the newspaper, the reporters, they have to be quite careful what they report. Actually, they are tightly controlled by the law and so on. In some ways, I wouldn't be surprised if the Hong Kong government tried to sue some of the newspapers and say, this is total rubbish. They might try and say, this is total rubbish that this guy was taken across in the boot of a car unlawfully, you see. And so, I mean, a reporter with that would have to be quite careful. That might be why you don't often, why they are quite careful. If you read the story, they're quite careful the way they report it, and they say, this is what this man's wife said, etc., etc. But you can tell, reading between the lines, that the newspaper, certainly the South China Morning Post, they would not have put it on the front page if they weren't very, very, very convinced that actually happened to that guy.
So have you read about the BBC or CNN? Do they report?
I haven't actually, and I'll tell you.
Maybe we can check.
Yeah, it would be interesting actually to check.
Well, last night I actually searched on the internet for this case, and I don't see those big like CNN or BBC were reporting about it, but like Hong Kong headlines and those kind of websites actually have this article on it, but. Still, I think the discussion is not enough to catch like the majority of people in Hong Kong for this case, or feel that there's some problem in this case. Yeah.
But after our conversation here, so I think everybody has to be beware of it and pay more attention to this kind of news.
Actually, I want to use a quote from Mr. Wong Yuk-man Raymond always use. It's from a German referent back in the World War II. He said that first they came for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time there was no one left to speak up for me. That's a really good quote, and it actually reminds people that it's not about like yourself. It's about the whole society, and it might get to you. Yeah,
that quote I've read that. It's a favourite of mine actually. It's especially relevant to this case, isn't it? Actually, and that's why I think anyone listening should, hopefully think of what the hell they can do. Actually, if all of us spoke up enough about it, and it would, generate more discussion. It would build up some fight for justice, actually, because it is extremely important in that case. Actually, it's a real threat, I think.
I just think it's very funny. It's like the TV series X-Files, isn't
it?
Yeah. I mean, it's frightening,
very
actually.
X-Files, right?
and for that guy, for that to happen to him, and also for his wife, it must be an extremely traumatic situation, actually, to deal with, actually. And that guy has got no idea how long he's going to be held in prison now.
Right.
And frightening, actually. I would love to be able to speak to the chief executive and the chief justice and the head of the immigration and say, okay, come on, let's hear your version of events.
Yeah.
I